All right, welcome everybody. I think folks are just trickling in here from the waiting room, such as it is. Hi there, I'm Tara Tarango from the Van Andel Institute, and happy to have you join us. I'll be introducing some other folks who are helping me put this on in just a moment, but I wanted to welcome you all to come to this really interesting, game-changing topic. I hope this is a very useful hour for you, both in terms of sharing a little bit of information with you, but also sharing information with one another. We call this event Better Together because so often administrators, it can be a very isolating job. You don't always get to talk to someone else who has that similar job, who's responsible for a school or a district in that way. And so you're all grappling with this notion of how do we navigate AI? How do we really leverage it for all the great things it can offer, but also how do we mitigate some of the risks that are kind of inherent in it as well? So we hope to share some information. We hope for everyone to share information with one another, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to facilitate that in a moment. So thank you for joining. It's such a crazy, busy time as always as we kick off the school year. So I know it's hard to carve out the time. So it's always fun to start off, with a cartoon, right? Who doesn't love to start a presentation with a cartoon? So my colleague Ben found this and I thought it was pretty cute. It says, to prove you're a human, click on all the photos that show places you would run for shelter during a robot uprising. So it feels like that could totally happen, actually. So that this could be our future. So I thought that was kind of a cute way to kick off a talk about AI. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes, like I said, giving kind of an overview of AI. And some lessons learned, talking to our panel of experts that I'll introduce in a moment here. And then we're going to break up into those small groups. So feel free at this first part to keep your camera off if you'd like, especially if you need it for bandwidth or something. But when we get in those small groups, I encourage you to turn your camera on and participate. Like I said, we're better together, and we hope this is going to be as good as the information that you're able to contribute to it and listen to your colleagues. So we'll break out into some breakout groups and talk about some specific questions, and then we'll wrap it up with some takeaways at the end. So I'll start by introducing AI and thinking about, some folks think it's, immediately they hear about it and they think it's, Terminator, end of the world, the machines are going to take over. Others are thinking, it's detrimental in terms of we're just going to lose literally our minds, our ability to think and critical thinking as a species. And of course, those that are thinking about it could just be used for sort of those nefarious purposes by characters with sort of not so great motives, which is obviously all things to maybe think about and consider. But this idea that it's sort of the end of humanity, I think, is on one very far end of the spectrum. And of course, there's the others that have those rose-colored glasses on and think that it's going to increase productivity. We're all going to be able to write like wildfire. We're going to have so much time. We're all just going to be able to relax at the beach and all our work is going to get done for us. That it's basically the answer to everything. And of course, with anything in education or just in life in general, right? It's about the balance. It's about how do we take those two worldviews and say, what's the reality here between these? There are some things to be worried about and to mitigate risks around, but there are also some things to be excited about, but it's not the end of humanity and it's not the answer to everything. So I want to start with getting a feel for who's out here. And I want to say there is no shame if you have never used ChatGPT, barely even heard of it, not even heard of it. We want to get a sense for who is here and how much do we know about this? So we're going to launch a poll really quick here, and you can answer that. Have you never heard of tools like ChatGPT, heard of it, but never used it, dabbled in it a little bit, use it periodically, or use it frequently? Curious to see who we have on the call here. All right, we'll give that just a few more seconds as they're rolling in. Can you guys see the results as they come in? Or is that just me?
I can see them.
Okay.
I don't think the participants can.
All right. Maybe
we'll reveal that real soon.
All right. I think we can go ahead and close that out. Slow down a little bit. There we go. Yeah. Share results. So you can see, all right. I'm glad, very few have never heard of it. If you came to the webinar, I suppose you've heard of it a little bit. A fair amount have heard of it, but never used it. Some have dabbled in it a little bit, about 30%. Those last three. So we have a bit of kind of heavier users here, which is good to know. And I've got to make for really rich discussions in our breakout room. So I'm glad to have you here and have a little expertise on the call. So that's fantastic. All right. I'm going to close that out and take a look at this. So I think the folks on this call, not surprisingly, are a little bit ahead of, I'd say, the actual curve in the general population. So most folks think we are still in this early adopters phase. So, the majority of folks are still not quite caught on. I think most people have heard about it by now, but they haven't necessarily even dabbled in it. So I think it's really important, especially for those of us, who most of us on this call seem like we're in that kind of early adopter category, have at least dabbled in it a little bit, to think about how we share this with other people as well. So I'll give you a little bit of how we do that. We talk about AI. What is AI? And I always like to go back to Alan Turing, kind of the father of computer science, if you will. And he put out a very simple test, which was just if you can, create a piece of writing from a machine, and a human is able to produce a piece of writing, and another human can't tell the difference, can't tell which one was produced by a human versus which one was produced by a machine. That is artificial intelligence. And I think most people would say that tools like ChatGPT or Google's Bard have absolutely passed that Turing test. They are things that you wouldn't necessarily know were written by a machine. Now, it goes well beyond text generation. So just to kind of give you a little bit of the breadth that's out here, I sort of tailored a set of tools that I think are most pertinent to administrators, school administrators, but obviously there's coding tools. There's all sorts of other tools as well, but plenty of things within the text generation strand. As I mentioned, we talked about Google Bard and ChatGPT, but all the grammar specific ones, copywriting specific ones. Graphic design is an area that I think has a lot of interesting potential, and there's some cool tools in there as well. So you can say, make this text look like a designed poster. You could also look at something that I use quite often, and I think, how often are we creating a presentation for a staff meeting or something, and you just need just the perfect image for it, and it doesn't exist, but you have something in your mind. You can put it into these different art generators, and they will give you exactly what it is you're looking for. So, for example, let's say I wanted to create an image of a school principal with a superhero cape in a pop art style. Well, all I need to do is ask for it, and there you got it, right? Pretty fun way to create some art. So I put these up here. Also want to kind of address a couple of things with this, because yes, there are a plethora of tools out there. Number one, they're changing all the time. Since I put this up, I think Dropdeck has changed their name to Typeset. You can't really keep up. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other is that everyone is now saying they have AI. They have to, or they're going to get completely left behind. So there's also sort of a buyer beware, I think, to this, where, not all AI is considered or is created equal, right? Some of them are much better than others. So we have to kind of really look into them deeply before we say, yes, this is something we can use. Don't just assume because it says it's AI that it does that. But for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to talk mostly around ChatGPT, sort of text generation tools like that. So what I wanted to do, for those of you, there are some out here who have only dabbled in it a little bit. So I did want to show you how this works. And this is something I encourage you, if you are someone who's using it fairly frequently and you want to introduce it to your staff, this is a great way I've found to introduce it to educators and to other administrators or other people that you're working with, is to just do a quick demonstration. I think there's something in the power of seeing it, how quick it can work. So I wanted to do a demonstration. Here are some typical 5th grade life science test questions. So I want to see what you guys want me to test it with. So let's see what ChatGPT puts out for a typical test question. So write in the chat, if you will, just 1 or 2 words from these. Do you want me to type in, or if you have your own question, how does the circulatory and respiratory system work together? What is an ecosystem? Give an example of a producer of a food chain. What's the difference between a predator and prey? Give an example of one species from each of the 5 major kingdoms. Let me see the chat, see what are people interested in. Just pick one of this, predator and prey. So, okay, I'm gonna get a few so I can choose a winner here. All right. It looks like we got a lot of circulatory and respiratory and predator and prey. Let's go with circulatory and respiratory. That was pretty quick. All right, let me come back here. Thanks for doing that. And I am going to escape out of here for a second. Oops. We will do, what is the difference between a predator and prey? Copy that. So for those of you who haven't seen it before, I just want to show you. It might ignore my really busy desktop in the background. If that stresses you out, I apologize. So I'm going to go over here to ChatGPT. If you aren't familiar with it, it's a very simple login, just like anything that has a login and a password. So you get in here, and once you're in, you can start a new chat by clicking the box up here. And that gives you a place to write down at the bottom, send a message. So I'm going to paste exactly what we said. What is the difference between a predator and prey? And I'm going to say, answer as if you were a fifth grader, because that's often a trick that fifth grader. All right, let's see that I hit return. So if you haven't seen this before, if you have, this will be old hat, but says sure. And it gives you here, imagine you're in the wild, like a forest. A predator is like the hunter in the forest. It's an animal that likes to catch, to eat other animals. So predators are the ones doing the hunting, like lions, wolves, or eagles. So if you got this answer from a fifth grade student, you'd be like, yeah, they definitely know what predator and prey is, but do they? They just got ChatGPT to do it for them, right? So this is why some people are concerned. You know, how can you tell that it's not just being completely straight up plagiarized? So that's definitely a concern. We'll talk about that in our groups, I'm sure. But I also want to share with you some of the power of it. So over here, I just typed a prompt that I like to show people when I'm showing how this can work for you. So as administrators, we want to keep our staff happy, right? We want to make sure they know that we appreciate them. So here's a great prompt that you can use in ChatGPT. I told it, can you write 9 short inspirational messages for teachers, one for each month, September through May? Each one should be no more than 100 words, because teachers have no time, but should highlight how much I value their hard work and dedication and all they do for students. These should be creative and innovative and make the teacher smile. Now, again, or not again, but warning, that's a little hokey, but I'm kind of hokey. So that works for me. If you're not, that's not your personality, you change up the prompt to do what works for you, right? That's the beauty of it. But I can go right over here to ChatGPT and I can say, paste that right in. Oops. Looks like I didn't actually paste it. Still got predator and prey. One moment. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come back over here to ChatGPT and paste that in. All right. Here you go. Let's just see what it comes up with. Here's for September. You're the compass that guides our learning journey this year. Your dedication lights up our classroom. I mean, it's sweet. It's adorable. Again, that's mine personality. So I put that in there. It's giving me that back. Let's look at February, my birth month. Your teaching warms our hearts more than hot cocoa on a chilly day. You're our Valentine all year round. I mean, who has the time to come up with all this stuff? Yet if you would put these, you know, I could paste these into my calendar right now. I know that that's something I could send out to my teachers each month just to help them, you know, get that little bit of a pick me up. So I wanted to show you kind of a negative case scenario, something that how students can maybe use it nefariously, but also a positive, how it could save you time in meeting some of your goals as an administrator. So hopefully that is something that's helpful. If you haven't seen ChatGPT used, that was helpful. Or if you have, but you want to think of ways that you can share it with your colleagues, I think that would be helpful. All right, so that's our little demo portion. So as promised, let me introduce the real stars of the show. I want to have you hear from practitioners that are doing jobs like yours. So Sonia Jackson, she is a principal at Southfield Public Schools and has really developed a really fantastic culture there and has been using AI for a while now and is starting to work on some policies in her school. Stephen Best is someone who works with schools to help them really bring out innovative practices and bring out the best learning and teaching that can happen in that school. And so he is here with us as well, also has dabbled a lot in AI. And Ben Talsma, who is with Van Andel Institute, and he's done a lot with helping teachers start to implement this in their classrooms and helping administrators start to implement this in their schools in meaningful ways to really supercharge teaching and learning. So that's what I think about them. And what we'll do is I'll kind of put out some questions, but if you have some questions for the panel, or if you have some follow-up questions to what maybe I've asked, go ahead and put those in there. And if we have time, I'll shoot those to our panel of experts as well. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so that you can see them nicely. All right, so I'm going to take the first one. We'll start on a positive note and go to Sonia. So I know you have been using ChatGPT and have found it to be really, really helpful with some of your administrator tasks. So can you share some examples of how it's made your job a little easier?
Yes, I will. And thank you for having me. I'm excited about ChatGPT because it has made my life easier. This is my 10th year as an administrator, and what I found to be very helpful, because I sent out a weekly newsletter, and anyone that is doing that, you know, that's a lot of work to come up with something to go in that newsletter weekly. I wanted to do it monthly or quarterly, but my parents would not allow it. So that's why I'm doing it weekly. And that came about for COVID, right? Because we had to send out so much communication to our families. So that's why I'm sending out weekly. But what I use it for more than anything else is developing that paragraph, the introduction of, what the week is going to, things to look for in the coming week. And with the Chat GPT, you still have to put in information. It just doesn't come up magically of what you want to say. So I have to put a few hints in as to what we're doing for that week, and it creates a wonderful newsletter for me. So I love using it for my S'mores newsletter. Also emails, responding to emails. As an administrator, we have a lot of emails. We have a plethora of emails that we have to respond to. And it's also helpful with just sending that quick email, that quick response. But I will point out too, that you have to, of course, read it. You just can't send it out, because sometimes it sounds like you're talking about someone else and you don't want to send anything out. And they're like, okay, who is she talking about? Or who are they talking about? So you want to make sure you proof it before you send it out. But it is very helpful with responding to those quick emails. And also I use it for translation, because I have some families with and I'm done diverse backgrounds. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. And I have some families from West Africa. I have some Vietnamese families. I have some Spanish speaking families. And it has been a lifesaver communicating with parents. And it brought one of my parents, we had curriculum night, my Vietnamese parent, it brought her to tears that I was able to print out my newsletter in her language. So I love it. I can go on and on. I can really go on and on all the things that I'm using it for. Just today I did, we're having a assembly tomorrow for OK to Say. And I put in for questions, a short quiz, just so we can, make sure students are, assess the students with the information they're going to receive for OK to Say. And I asked for a short quiz. It spit out 10 multiple choice questions for OK to Say, which was really surprising for me, seeing that is a Michigan-based program. It still was able to spit out some information to provide that quiz. And again, I can go on and on. I don't want to take more than my time, but it's so many different things that I'm using it for. But mainly is that newsletter and responding to those emails, and also now being able to communicate with my family with those different backgrounds.
Excellent. Now you can definitely see, I can see why you're excited. Those are significant time savers for you, when that's super valuable. Let's go to the other side of the coin and address this to you, Stephen. Maybe can you share an example where maybe AI has caused a challenge for a school, and maybe how they worked through it?
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of the schools that I've been working with have seen this, and just like you said when you were showing that kind of bell curve graph, there were some who looked at it with the thought of, wow, what opportunities we have, and then a lot who were like, oh my God, this is going to ruin my classroom. And so you really need to kind of navigate that space. And so one of the things that was really important to do with some of the educators that I was working with is really look at what the tool might come up with, and then help them basically say, instead of just saying, no, we won't use it, and we're going to restrict it, and we won't let kids use it. We know senses out there that really isn't going to happen. They're going to find ways to do something with it. So it was really an opportunity to take the time to work with these educators to say, so let's see what this generates, and let's figure out some different strategies for how you can modify your assignments so that it's not something where GPT would just be spitting out the answer that kids will give you. Let's acknowledge it, and let's actually embrace it and say, okay, so in this particular case with one of the schools I worked with, they embedded a couple Chat GPT prompts into the assignment to tell students, you're going to have to ask about this specific thing, and we want you to come up with 3 different prompts. So just like you were typing this in, thinking of some different ways to type it in to get some different responses. And then they had to kind of analyze between the prompts that they got and between prompts among the class, what was going on and where it might be coming up with different kinds of information. And part of that was to try and figure out how could they better improve what they ask ChatGPT to do. But more importantly, how can they look at this to really find what the limitations are and where they are going to need to step in and where they can improve it. And so the nice thing about any of that is it really takes the opportunity to take this skill that normally we've just worked on the writing skills, but now this is a chance to really elevate it. And if we think of things like Bloom's taxonomy and being able to kind of go up the ladder into analysis and synthesis, this was really an opportunity for those educators to make a more rigorous task by including the use of AI in the task. And so I've seen those kinds of things, and I've seen principals and other building leaders really kind of set up committees with those educators who are doing innovative things to let them feel out what this is going to be like, so that they're using those innovators and early adopters to help pave the way for the rest of the school, so that it doesn't just become a case of let's restrict it, or let's bury our head in the sand and not acknowledge this thing that is out there now. So
very good. Yeah, I think I'm gonna send this one to Ben, and then I might address some of the questions that are coming through in the chat. So keep those coming. But because Ben, I think similar to what Steve was talking about, you've worked with teachers on how they how they need to change their instruction. So maybe you can share some of the things you've talked about in terms of how teachers need to change their instruction now that AI is so accessible.
Yes, we think about that sort of in two different dimensions. One is that mitigating risk side of things, where teachers are changing their instruction to accommodate the fact that if they give a writing assignment that's take home, there's really no reliable way to detect whether or not a student generated it themselves or whether or not they utilized AI pretty heavily. There are detectors out there. They definitely have their flaws. And so it shifts that burden a little bit. And so we're seeing a lot of teachers moving toward more things that are like handwritten in class to kind of counteract that. Where they're writing it down in class, they can't really use GPT, or where they're engaging in dialogue. One big shift that we're seeing is toward more authentic instruction and more authentic assessment. This whole idea that, okay, you understand something, now what? Can you put it to use out there in in an authentic way? When teachers and schools are working like that, then I think that makes AI, if you're going to use it, you're going to use it in the same way that they will for the rest of their life, which is to augment their abilities and to help themselves have a positive influence out there. So authentic instruction is certainly a big shift that we're seeing as a way to kind of accommodate the world of AI, if that makes sense. On the other side of things, we've got like all these new capabilities, right? And so teachers can, we think about teachers can be superpowered now. So if they could not draw, I certainly could not draw when I was in the classroom full time, but now I can make pictures to kind of help engage my students in the lesson, or to help elucidate a concept a little bit more cleanly. If they can't sing, they can make songs. If they can't code, they can make computer games. We're literally seeing teachers use tools like GPT to help make little games that students can engage with to learn their content more deeply. So there's tons of ways that teachers are using these tools to kind of unlock new capabilities. They're having their students do things like, if you're learning about Picasso, you can chat with him, right? Have GPT play the role of Picasso, or play the role of a leaf who's going through photosynthesis, and learn what it's like from the leaf's perspective. We love to do things like beat ChatGPT. I think Stephen was alluding to that, where it's like, all right, for the rest of your life, you are going to be seeing whether you can add value to the stuff that AI is coming up with, right? And so helping students to practice that by giving them some of those prompts and saying, all right, how can you make this better? How can you bring your unique perspective to that? So we're seeing definitely teachers doing things a little bit differently to mitigate some of those challenges, but also capitalizing on some of those risks to take their instruction to the next level. Again, like Stephen alluded to, is teaching deeper, right? Teaching students to think more deeply using these tools. Make sense?
Makes sense. It makes me think, maybe this is me and my rose-colored glasses, but it makes me think, so often we are thinking about how maybe standardized tests don't measure the very things that we think you actually need to be successful in school. And maybe AI can be a push toward that, because it's going to force us to have more authentic assessments to know what our students really know and can do. So maybe it can help push that argument as well, but we'll see. That's a fight for another day. I'm going to combine one of my planned questions with one in the chat here. So someone in the chat wrote, how are sites dealing with the legal age restrictions on ChatGPT 13 plus or BARD 18 plus, etc.? In California, if the tools do not align with the student privacy laws, we're not supposed to use them. How do schools deal with student privacy concerns? So I want to lump that all with the question I was planning to ask you, Sonia, which is how's your school going to make policies for AI? So policies would include some of these things that is brought up here in the chat with age restrictions, privacy, things like that. So how are you going about making policies? It's early days.
Yes, and it is early days, especially for not only my school, my district. Currently, the district does not have any policies in place. They have not tackled that. Again, I think they're fearful, as a lot of people are. But as for my school, I've developed a committee, all stakeholders. And also we've used Office of Educational Technology, which is a very good resource, and looking at the different policies, and also partnering with other schools that have been using it longer than us, because it is a topic that we have to tackle. And that is one of the concerns, and everything, the research that we've done is the research that my committee we've done, is that's one of the biggest thing is the privacy, the FERPA, that falls under that. So we're in early stages of developing that, but I have invited parents, other administrators, my staff, and also my curriculum leaders on how we're going to tackle that as a school, because again, there are FERPA laws that we have to look at, but we have been using the Office of Technology, which is a government resource that we've been using. It's been very helpful.
Some of the things that we've talked about doing is, it is early days and there are no definitive sources out there. And I think Dawn just put a link into Office of Educational Technology with some of that. So thank you, Dawn.
Yes,
but some very specific things they're very general, but at least some tangible things we could say is being mindful of what you put in, no proprietary information, no personal identification, no first name, last name, and no proprietary information. Very simple rule going in. And then in terms of what comes out, making sure a human reviews what comes out before it is published as let's say a legal document. So those are very broad. That's as far as we've gotten in terms of actual legit policies to possibly recommend.
Yeah, thank you, Tara, for that, and that's why I mentioned the FERPA, because we know FERPA law, it has a list of things that you can follow. And that's what one of our bases that we've been basing everything on, and definitely not putting a student's name in there. And as I mentioned before, you have to proof before you actually send it out. It's a good tool, but it's like the same thing as when we use a calculator, you put data in there, but again, it's what you put in. So just be very mindful of that as well, and always proof. But as Tara said, we don't use names as students first, especially first or last name. And when I use the example for emails, it's typically to a colleague or central office or to a parent. And again, I make sure that I proof that and make sure that I'm following all laws with that.
I'm going to combine another question with one that's in the chat. So one of the questions in the chat, and I love this, is what are your ethical considerations using AI for such admin tasks? The example that I just did of the little pick-me-ups, and not denoting it was created by ChatGPT or other AI. So I was going to ask Stephen, what administrators are most worried about, and is there anything that can allay those worries right now? So this is potentially one worry, right? The ethical concerns with it. So maybe you can address what worries they have, and specifically this one.
Sure. I think this obviously brings up an ethical consideration of any of the kind of information that's being generated, not only to see whether or not the kinds of things that in this case administrators might be generating to put out to the world are authentic and appropriate for what needs to be done, but also frankly to see whether people are posing prompts to ChatGPT that might actually also be taking copywritten ideas or information from people. And so I think with those things, one of the considerations that I know some of the schools that I've been working with are looking at is being very deliberate about the kinds of tasks that they're putting out to these tools. So for instance, Sonia mentioned the task around language translation. And so, I think that is one where I've seen a number of schools and school districts utilize this particular tool. For some of the other kinds of things, though, where either ethics issues or privacy comes into play, I've seen schools deliberately for now taking a fairly conservative stance. So, for instance, on the question you had earlier about the age levels, the example that I shared out where teachers talked about like having to generate 3 different prompts and having to kind of compare what the results are in class. Part of that design was also to deliberately put this in the hands of teachers putting the prompts in rather than simply having students set up their own accounts for things. And so I think a lot of schools are really trying to establish some practices that for now are taking a fairly hesitant stance from a policy perspective, simply because they don't know all of what's happening within the AI and where the data might be coming from, what it might be using in the end. And there are also groups, thankfully, that are coming out with some advanced policy who understand the tools a little bit more. So in particular, OpenAI, which is the company that created ChatGPT, has actually just come out with a manual for educators, which addresses some policy considerations. It addresses appropriate use in the classroom. Other groups are doing that as well. I know some colleges and universities are looking at these things in particular. So MIT has a few different resources that when I stop talking, I'll find the links and plug them into the chat here as well. But they've really a lot of groups have been stepping up, trying to kind of shape what the policy arena looks like for all of this work, recognizing that it is likely going to be a moving target as we go. But in doing so, trying to figure out what are some ways that we can do this fairly conservatively now, because we don't want to just break things wide open. We want to be very cautious in how we move forward.
And that's good advice. And so I want to give one more question to each of the panelists. And maybe I'll start with Ben and then Sonia and then Stephen. And that is just, given where we are now, what advice do you have for administrators who are trying to navigate AI in their schools? So I'll give that to you, Ben, and then Sonia, and then Stephen, and then we will tap the expertise of the group in our breakout rooms.
I think my main bit of advice was referenced earlier, not sticking your head in the sand. Become familiar with this, educate yourself, take some time to experiment, to explore, to talk with your teachers about how they're seeing it used by themselves and by others. Make sure that you are staying abreast of this, because this is a big deal. It's not a passing fad. It's definitely something that's going to be transformative for society and also for schools. And so making sure that you are up to speed on this is extremely important. It's critical.
Definitely good advice. I know you gave that to me, and I did exactly that, and now I'm never
check
going
it
back.
out. Experiment, explore, and make sure that you have that hands-on familiarity with this, so that you can have an informed perspective on these issues.
All right, Sonia, what about you? What's your best advice?
It's really echoing what Ben just said, but I have set up professional development for my staff. You have to educate them, and also make sure that they're part of the conversation when you're making policies, because again, that's their classroom. And again, you want to make sure that their voice is heard, because some of them are doing a lot of pushback with AI. And it's understandable, because, the first thing they feel is that students are cheating. But again, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And I think just providing them with the professional development, the new knowledge, I think is very critical. And I think you'll have more people to buy in if they feel a part of something and it's not thrown at them. And that's what I've done. That's what I've started to do as well this year.
Very good. All right, Stephen, take us out.
I would, I'm just going to echo what has been said, but I would say two things very deliberately. I think one of them is if you are setting up some different committees that are looking at this or looking at policies, remember that this can't work like some of the committees where you're looking at, we're going to plan for now, and then in May we're going to come out with our policy, because by May we will be so far down this road that whatever you come up with now will be obsolete completely. So if you're going to have groups do this, set up short-term intervals of looking at the information, not just at the policies that they're looking at externally to see what might be going on in other places, but whatever you're doing inside your school district, report on that quickly, come up with policies as you're going, kind of move the bar as you go. And the other thing I would say with this is where you can kind of stay tuned into what's going on with all of this, I think is helpful with respect to what you're seeing in the classroom. But there's also a lot of information that's out there that kind of points to where all of this AI work is going. Because I think when you alluded earlier to the notion of we can look at this as like it's going to kill us all versus it will save the world, like I think part of what is always helpful in any education policy is looking at some of the big picture issues of where this is going so that people get a clearer understanding of what AI is. Because while Chat GPT is obviously a piece that's affecting education much more than in other areas, it is something where it's more helpful for us to also understand the bigger picture of what is AI really going for and what's happening in some different areas, because that's what our kids are going to be living with down the road. And we've got a plan for that.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you guys so much. You're in the trenches and sharing what you know, and when you're living with it as it's happening, right? So I really appreciate that. I'm going to come back here and share the screen again just to prep us for the next part of our time together. So thank you to our panel for sure. And if you have more questions for them, feel free to throw those in the chat. We can always send them to them afterwards and answer that in follow-up emails as well. But I want to move now. Like I said, I think there's a lot of expertise within this group. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben, who's going to help us facilitate our breakout rooms.
All right. And in order to do that, I've shared into the chat box a Padlet. If you want to go ahead and open up the Padlet, this is a great mechanism for collecting and sharing ideas. We're going to use that as we go into those breakout rooms. This is called Better Together because we want to be able to have some conversations with each other, to share, to bounce ideas around. And as we do, we also want to be able to share our insight with the people in the other groups. So as you discuss these three questions, just kind of verbally in a small group discussing how are you using AI, how are you mitigating risks, and how are you developing AI policies? As you personally have an idea that you thought was particularly resonant, you hear something great from one of your colleagues, go ahead and click the plus there underneath that question, and that will give you the ability to add your idea to share that out with the group. We're going to give you about 15 minutes to discuss these three questions. As you go into those groups, sometimes it's helpful to have a facilitator. So today, if you need help choosing a facilitator, you can pick the person whose birthday is the closest to June 23, which is the birthday of Alan Turing, that founder of computer science. So we are going to go ahead and open those breakout rooms up. When you get that invite, hop into the room and then just collect those ideas in the Padlet to share out with the rest of the group. If you do have any questions, I'm going to stay here in the main room, so you can pop right up and feel free to do that to ask any questions that you may have. You should see an invitation to join that room. 15 minutes. Enjoy being better together. If you were going to take that away, that conversation away, and say, what was your biggest idea? What was your biggest takeaway? I'd be curious to know what that is. If you just want to enter that into the chat box, not the Padlet, but the chat box, we can see that come streaming across the screen. Brian says, thanks for a great conversation to all. This room. Tara learned about Magic School AI. Excellent. Good point, Amy. Wonderful. Draft backs, very interesting. Love it. So you can see those ideas coming through, the biggest takeaways from across the various rooms. Again, thanks for sharing your insights and for listening to the insights of others for sure. We wanted to bring things to a close here by mentioning how we can help support schools in navigating these waters. So a couple of big ways that we're supporting schools these days. One of them is thinking about these policies. We've got structures that we can help put in place to make sure that all of the different stakeholders are involved. Stephen talked about making sure that these policies are nimble, right? That we're doing some updates throughout the year to these things. If you heard that and you said gulp, that is kind of a big undertaking. We can help to support the development of those policies, making sure that all stakeholders are involved. We definitely are doing a lot of professional development around this topic right now, helping teachers to mitigate those risks, but also to capitalize on the potential that's available here. Get them excited about how they can use these tools to really transform their teaching and learning. This is one of the most impactful professional developments that we do. When people walk away from this, they definitely have a different perspective on how their year is going to go. And usually that is a more excited perspective because they understand how to unlock that potential. We can provide coaching support along the way. So as teachers are working with these tools, as they're working through their year, we can help provide dynamic support to adjust to the issues that they're encountering and to help make sure that they feel confident and comfortable using these tools effectively, to use them wisely and to use them well. So we can help in a lot of different dimensions. Super curious, as you think about your needs as a school, which of those would be interesting or important for you? So I'll open up this poll. If you could just indicate which of those three do you find would be most interesting? You can pick more than one, certainly, if more than one is of particular interest to you. So I'll give people just 10, 15, 20 seconds to indicate which one they think would be a helpful support for their school. We've got 12 of 23 answered. Give them about 5 more seconds to indicate, and then we'll end that poll. All right, let's take a look at those results. You can see that professional development is definitely something that lots of schools are interested. That's what we're finding as well. And certainly if that's something you'd be interested in connecting and talking with us about how we can provide that professional development, we'd be more than excited to do that. This is what we do. We support schools. We're a not-for-profit organization that exists to serve educators. So we would love to be of service. All right, thank you so much for your time today. Before we go, just like to recognize the fear that surrounds some of these tools. Yes, there is the potential for lots of risk. However, your teachers can definitely capitalize on the potential here. So it can help them to feel like they're more confident, more in control, and that they're teaching and transforming lives in a deeper fashion. Since you showed up and donated your time or spent your time, you can get 20% off any work that you do with us. We've got the attendance list, so when you reach out to us, we'll know that you get that 20% discount. We also give away free food and an opportunity to learn about a variety of different topics. We do more than just AI. So if you are interested in trying to win a free lunch and learn, we can do this in person or virtually. You can enter to win by filling the form out that was in the chat box there. I'd like to thank all of you for your time. I'd especially like to thank again our panelists for contributing their insight, their expertise. It was really interesting to hear your wisdom and your experience. Thanks to Tara for facilitating, and thanks to all of you for all the work that you do with your staff, with your students every day to make the world a little better place. Have a wonderful day, and thank you very much.